But something deeper in him recognized the man, not in familiarity of face, but in familiarity of loss. Two broken worlds had collided across a sticky diner table, and neither belonged to chance. The old man extended his hand. "My name is Harlan." He hesitated, then shook it. Warm, firm, grounding, like a lifeline thrown across a storming sea. "Ethan," he replied, almost whispering his own name, as if speaking it out loud felt fragile. Harlan nodded slowly, like he had expected that answer long before it was spoken. "You've lost something," he said. Ethan let out a bitter breath that might have been a laugh in another life. "Everything. Job this morning. My wife tonight. My kids." His voice cracked, splintering like thin glass. "She took them." Harlan didn't react with shock or pity. Instead, his eyes softened with a recognition of a wound he already knew intimately. "I know that feeling," the old man said. "Different story. Same emptiness. Same belief that the world is telling you you don't matter." Ethan felt exposed, completely, painfully, as if someone had reached inside and turned every hidden bruise into open skin. Harlan's voice was calm, steady, truthful in a way that made denial impossible. "You think no one would notice if you disappeared," the man continued. "You think fading away would hurt less than standing up and fighting." Ethan swallowed hard, because that was exactly the thought he had been walking with through the cold streets, the idea of becoming nothing, and how strangely easy it seemed. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Harlan leaned just slightly forward, eyes burning with something fierce, not anger, but conviction. "You can lose a job. You can lose a marriage. You can lose every ounce of certainty you ever had," he said. "But you cannot lose yourself. Not unless you hand yourself over." Silence settled, heavy as stone. And for the first time since his world collapsed, Ethan felt something flicker inside. Not hope, not yet, but the faint heat of something not yet dead. Harlan saw it. He leaned closer, voice dropping into a tone that carried weight like prophecy, like warning, like the last rope extended over a cliff. 5 words. Sharp enough to carve a new path into a dying life. "Don't abandon them like me." The air changed. The world shifted. A ghost of a future Ethan could still avoid hung between them like mist. And in that moment, that single suspended breath, his story stepped off the ledge toward something different. Toward a fight he never thought he had the strength to start. The world inside that diner went still the moment those 5 words left Harlan's mouth. "Don't abandon them like me." They didn't sound like advice. They sounded like confession, like a life sentence carved into a man's soul. Ethan felt the words settle beneath his ribs, sharp and unyielding, as if they had been waiting all along for a moment when he was too broken to deflect them. He stared across the table at the stranger who seemed to see straight through skin and bone, past pride and humiliation, into the soft place where fear lived. Ethan's hands curled slowly around the coffee cup, not for warmth but for anchoring. He needed something to hold, anything, because his world felt like it was sliding. "What do you mean?" he asked, and the question came out thin, like a thread about to snap. Harlan didn't look away. His face barely moved, yet his silence thundered louder than any storm. When he finally spoke, it was with a weary precision of someone who had rehearsed this truth for decades. "My son didn't vanish in a moment," he said. "He slipped away one day at a time. First from the dinner table, then from conversation, then from our home, and then from the world." Ethan's breath faltered. Harlan's voice wasn't tragic. It was restrained, controlled, as if the only way to survive loss like that was to hold it tight enough to stop it from tearing open again. "I thought giving him food and a roof was enough. I thought discipline meant silence. I thought love could be understood without being spoken." He exhaled slowly, eyes fixed on a memory only he could see. "I was working, providing, building, while he was shrinking, drowning, leaving." Ethan felt his throat tighten. His mind flashed back to every night he arrived home late, too tired to speak. To every time Nolan asked a question he answered half-heartedly. To every moment Tessa climbed into his lap and he thought his presence alone was enough. Maybe it wasn't. Harlan continued, voice low, nearly breaking. One morning, he was simply gone. No note, no sign, just gone. He swallowed. And every year since, I ask myself if he walked away because he believed I didn't care. The room seemed to pulse around them, lights humming softly, forks clinking in the distance, but their booth was isolated in something heavier. Something sacred. Ethan couldn't blink. Couldn't breathe right. He saw it now, the regret etched into Harlan's posture, the way the man's shoulders curved inward as if they were carrying 3 decades of what ifs. This wasn't just a story. It was a warning forged in grief. Harlan leaned back slightly, fingers interlacing on the table. His hands were strong, weathered, scarred. Hands that had built a life and buried a dream in the same lifetime. You still have a chance, he said. Don't let bitterness make you quiet. Don't let pain turn you into absence. Don't let your children wonder if you love them enough to stay. Every word landed like a hammer on Ethan's chest, splintering numbness into raw, trembling awareness. The weight of what he could still lose, truly lose, hit him with brutal clarity. Jobs return. Pride rebuilds. But a child's faith, once fractured, is difficult to restore. He whispered, barely audible. I don't know if I'm strong enough. Harlan's eyes sharpened. Strength isn't the absence of pain. Strength is standing in spite of it. Ethan felt the room tilt, not physically, but inside him. Something dark and heavy shifted. His shame, once crushing, now trembled beneath a spark of defiance. Harlan continued, voice steady but fierce. You are a father. That means you fight, even when you bleed. Especially when you bleed. The old man wasn't asking him to fix everything. He was demanding he refuse to disappear. Ethan looked at his scarred hands. The same hands that built machines. The same hands that carried his newborns. The same hands that trembled when he signed termination papers. They were not remarkable, but they were alive. Capable. Still his. He exhaled shakily. I want to see them. I want to show them I'm not gone. Then go, Harlan said without hesitation. Not tomorrow. Not when you feel ready. Now. The directness of it stunned him. Now. As if waiting was the first step toward abandonment. But fear pushed back hard, cold and logical in the worst ways. What if she slams the door in my face? Ethan murmured. What if they don't want to see me? What if? Harlan's hand came down on the table, not loud, but firm enough to cut through every spiraling doubt. If you do not go, he said, voice like thunder contained in a whisper, their last memory of you will be silence. Silence. The most painful inheritance a child could receive. Ethan's chest constricted as if invisible hands were tightening around it. He saw Nolan's uncertain eyes at the doorway. Tessa's trembling fingers around her bear. How small they looked. How lost. How breakable. A feeling rose inside him, not heroic, not cinematic, but primal. The instinct of a father. The refusal to let pain make him invisible. He stood abruptly, the booth seat scraping against tile, loud enough to draw a stare from a nearby table. His legs trembled, but they held. His voice, broken yet determined, cut through the diner air. I'm going to them. Harlan's gaze softened, pride flickering beneath the weight of sorrow. That, he said quietly, is what a father sounds like. Ethan nodded. He reached for his jacket, but hesitated. Something anchored him in place one moment longer. He looked at Harlan, trying to memorize him, the lines on his face, the gravity in his voice, the strange familiarity of his presence. Thank you, Ethan whispered. I don't know why you sat with me, but you saved me. Harlan's lips curved into a faint, unreadable smile. Maybe you saved me too. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Ethan wondered if Harlan would rise, follow him, stand at his shoulder when he faced Moriel's door. But the old man remained seated, hands wrapped around his coffee like someone warming themselves over memories rather than heat. Ethan turned toward the entrance. The diner door loomed like a threshold into a world he was no longer just enduring, but confronting. His pulse pounded in his ears. Fear, hope, desperation, all tangled into something painfully alive. He reached the door, placed his hand on the cool metal frame, and stopped just long enough to look back. Harlan watched him with steady eyes, not urging, not stopping, simply witnessing. Remember, Harlan said, voice low. The children of broken homes don't need a perfect man. They need a present one. Ethan nodded, no shake in his hand this time. I won't abandon them, he said. He stepped into the night. And for the first time in months, his steps had purpose. Every streetlight that passed through his windshield felt like a heartbeat, pulsing life where there had been none. He drove, faster than caution, slower than panic, but guided by something stronger than either. Guided by love sharpened into resolve. He didn't know what waited on the other side of Moriel's door, forgiveness or rejection, but he knew one thing with absolute clarity. He would knock. He would show up. He would stand. Because a man is not measured by the weight he carries, but by what he refuses to drop. The drive felt longer than the distance deserved, not measured in miles, but in heartbeats. Every street he turned down carried ghosts of memory. Sidewalks where Nolan learned to ride his bike, corners where Tessa once collected autumn leaves with giggling fists, days when love felt simple and future felt certain. Those moments tightened around his chest like a rope, painful reminders of all he stood to lose if he failed now. Headlights washed across Moriel's sister's house, a warm glow behind curtains, silhouettes moving inside. It looked safe. It looked lived in. It looked like a place where his children might already be trying to understand why their father hadn't followed them out the door. He parked, engine rumbling into silence. The world outside felt cold, but inside the car his palms burned with fear. For a moment, he sat motionless, breath shallow, imagining every possible outcome. Moriel slamming the door, the children turning away, humiliation swallowing whatever strength he had left. His mind whispered retreat, whispered you've already failed, whispered walk away quietly like she expects you to. Then he heard Harlan's voice, not audibly, but inside him, threaded into the ribs of his resolve. Don't abandon them like me. That single memory pushed his hand to the door handle. His feet touched pavement. The night air was sharp, almost punishing, but it woke him, stripped the numbness clean. With each step toward the porch his heartbeat surged like thunder under thin skin. Halfway there he considered turning back, that old instinct to disappear, to not make waves, but he kept walking. The doorbell glowed weakly beneath his touch. He pressed it. Footsteps. Voices dimming. A pause that felt like eternity. The door opened. Moriel stood framed in the threshold, face taut, arms crossed like armor. She looked at him not with nostalgia, but with calculation. Behind her, faint light spilled into the hallway, and somewhere deeper inside he heard the soft cadence of children's voices. What are you doing here? She asked, not angry, but irritated, inconvenienced, like his presence was a disruption to a life she was already rearranging without him. He swallowed, but his voice held steady. I came to see Nolan and Tessa. Her jaw tightened. It's not a good time. They're upset. You showing up unannounced isn't helping anything. She expected him to shrink, to nod, to leave quietly like a wounded animal. That was the man she remembered. The one who folded rather than pushed. The one she believed was easy to remove. But that man had died in a diner booth. No, he said, the word firm, shaped by grief and love interwoven. I'm not leaving without seeing them. Surprise flickered across her face. Brief, quickly buried. But it was there, recognition that something in him had shifted. Her voice sharpened. You don't get to walk back in and pretend you didn't let this happen. You failed, Ethan. You failed us. The words stung, but they no longer defined him. I lost my job, he said quietly. But I haven't lost my children. And I won't. He stepped forward, not threatening, but unshakably present. You can leave me if you need to, but you are not taking them away from me. For a moment, she was silent, studying him like he was a stranger she couldn't predict. Then a small voice pierced the tension. Dad! Nolan stood behind her, small shoulders, big eyes, everything about him asking questions he was too young to articulate. He stared at his father like someone looking at a shore from the middle of a storm. Hopeful, afraid, needing. Before Moriel could block him, Nolan stepped forward and wrapped his arms around Ethan's waist. It wasn't careful. It was desperate. The kind of hug that comes from a child who has been holding breath for hours waiting for release. Ethan bent shakily, arms folding around his son as though holding something fragile and irreplaceable. I knew you'd come, Nolan whispered, voice breaking on belief. Then a smaller body collided into him. Tessa, eyes glimmering with tears, arms flung around his neck. Daddy, are you staying with us? He inhaled sharply, overwhelmed. This was what love sounded like, what innocence felt like, what purpose tasted like. Warm, trembling, alive. He pulled them both close enough to feel their hearts against his own. I'm here, he said, voice thick. I'm not going anywhere again. Moriel watched, arms slowly lowering, anger deflating into something more complicated. Exhaustion, resentment, uncertainty. Maybe even regret. She didn't soften, not fully, but something inside her shifted as she looked at the three of them anchored together like a single thread refusing to snap. This doesn't fix everything, she said quietly. No, Ethan agreed. But it fixes something. He turned to his children, brushing Nolan's hair from his face, lifting Tessa into his arms like she weighed nothing. You're everything, he whispered to them. And I will fight for you. Every day. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Nolan's voice trembled. Promise. He looked him in the eyes, not as a broken man, but as a father rebuilt through love. I promise. Inside, the living room was warm with lamplight. They sat together, Nolan pressed against his side, Tessa curled in his lap. He didn't tell them everything. They were too young for the full map of heartbreak. But he spoke truth gently, that parents fight, that mistakes happen, that losing a job doesn't mean losing love. And with every word, he saw understanding settling into their small faces. They didn't need perfection. They just needed presence. Moriel's sister stepped into the doorway, voice soft. Let him be with them. They need this. Moriel hesitated, then stepped aside. A small gesture. A massive shift. Once laughter began filling the room, small, tentative, but real, Ethan realized something profound. He hadn't come here to win, to prove, to demand. He'd come to stay. To show up. To stand. And when the night grew late and he finally rose to leave, Nolan grabbed his arm, not from fear, but from trust. You'll come back tomorrow. Not pleading, expecting. Tools old as Ethan, rust crawling into creases like memory. You know engines better than most, his father muttered. Start with this. Build something that's yours. Ethan nodded, throat tight. No speeches were needed. Some blessings are given in tools, not words. Even his brother, Colin, ambitious, sharp, noticed the change. You look alive for the first time in years, man, he said over a beer one late evening. Ethan didn't argue. He felt it too, not reborn, but rebuilt. Most importantly, Nolan and Tessa never wondered if their father loved them again. They were no longer waiting at windows for footsteps that didn't come. He was there, not perfect, not whole, but present. That was enough. And then, one cool afternoon, almost exactly 1 month after the diner night, Ethan walked back into the place where everything changed. Not because he was lost now, but because he needed to finish something. A thank you. A closure. A debt of gratitude owed to the man who rerouted his fate with 5 quiet words. The bell over the diner door chimed. Same scent of grease and coffee. Same hum of conversation. But the booth where Harlan once sat was empty, only a ghost of memory filling the cushion. The waitress approached, smile practiced and familiar. Ethan cleared his throat. I'm looking for an older man, he said. Silver hair, sharp eyes. Name's Harlan. He talked to me here not long ago. Changed my life more than he knows. I want to thank him. She blinked, confusion sliding across her face. Harlan, she repeated slowly. You mean Harlan Vayner? Relief flickered. Yes, that was him. That was the name attached to the night everything began again. But the waitress nodded with a strange softness, like she was delivering fragile truth. Harlan hasn't been here in years, she said. He passed away a long time back. Stroke, I think. Maybe 10 years. Could be more. Good man. Quiet. A storm of a life, though. Ethan stopped breathing. His coffee, halfway to his lips, trembled in his hand. That can't be right, he whispered. I spoke to him. Here. Not long ago. He sat at that booth right there. He grabbed my arm. He told me not to abandon my children. She touched his wrist lightly, worry in her gaze. Harlan was here. Once. A lot, actually. Always ordered black coffee and sat in that corner alone. Her eyes softened further, filled with a knowing sadness. He talked about his missing boy until the day he died. Ethan turned slowly toward the empty booth, breathing shallow, heartbeat loud. The seat was untouched, undisturbed, but he could see him there all the same. Silver hair, weathered face, eyes heavy with regret. A father who lost a son, and who somehow found Ethan in the ashes of his own loss. Was it coincidence? Spirit? Fate? Did Harlan truly sit across from him? Or did the universe send a voice shaped like a man to catch someone falling into the same grave? He moved to the booth and sat where Harlan once sat, perhaps where he never left. The vinyl cushion sighed under his weight. He pressed his palm against the table's surface, cold, steady, as if searching for traces of another hand. He whispered into the quiet. Thank you. No answer came. Yet the silence felt like acknowledgement, like completion. Sometimes ghosts don't need to stay. Sometimes they only need to speak once. Ethan stood, breath steadier than before. The The world outside felt brighter. His steps carried something Harlan never did: return. He walked back into life, the kind he built, not inherited. The kind woven with second chances. He may never know what Harlan truly was, stranger or spirit, memory or miracle, but he carried those 5 words like armor. Don't abandon them like me. And he never did. He showed up. He fought quietly. He loved loudly enough to be heard for a lifetime. Because broken men can stand again. Because fathers are not measured by perfection, but by presence. Because sometimes a ghost's regret becomes another man's redemption. This was not a happy ending, but it was a true one. And true stories don't end. They continue. It began with a sentence sharp enough to sever a man's spirit clean in half. One quiet evening, under a roof he once believed was built from love, he was told he was worthless, and that his children were being taken from him. Not long before, he had stood in a factory hallway holding a cardboard box filled with 10 years of sweat, bone, and sacrifice. Dismissed as if his existence had never mattered at all. 2 losses in one day, his livelihood and his family, and the sound of the front door closing behind them was the final nail sealing him inside his own empty chest. If you have ever tasted silence thick enough to swallow you whole, stay with me. This story will not be gentle, and it will not heal quickly, but it will burn truth into your bones. If you've ever been told you weren't enough, if someone once made you believe you did not matter, then breathe with this story until its final word. Because you might find yourself in it. It happened quietly, not with screams or chaos, but with the soft finality of something that had been dying for years. A factory floor he had walked for a decade, a routine that shaped him more than any ambition ever had, gone with a handshake that felt more like a shove into the void. He stood there with a box of his life in his hands, gloves worn to the bone, a dented thermos smelling faintly of metal and coffee, and a faded lunch bag stitched lovingly by the mother who once told him hard work could build anything. That belief now felt like a lie. He drove home numb, headlights cutting through the slow grey of evening, his hands locked tight around the steering wheel as if loosening them might make him fall apart. Every turn was muscle memory. His mind had already drifted somewhere darker. In the passenger seat, that cardboard box sat like proof of failure, a list of everything he'd ever done that no longer mattered. The radio played something soft, distant, but he heard nothing. His head was full of silence thick enough to drown in. When he entered the house, there was no pause, no embrace, no moment of shared breath between husband and wife. Moriel's eyes flicked from him to the box in his arms, and in that single look he felt himself shrink. She didn't ask what happened. She already knew. The world only needed one more disappointment to confirm what she had secretly decided long ago. They let you go, didn't they? No sympathy. No break in her voice. Just certainty, sharp and cold. He nodded. Cutbacks. They. But she didn't wait for the explanation. Didn't offer comfort. Didn't even breathe slower. Instead, she delivered the blow she'd been saving, the one she must have rehearsed in the echo of every argument they'd had for years. You're worthless. I'm taking the kids. Worthless. A word that doesn't cut. It hollows. It digs from the inside, scooping out everything a person once believed themselves to be. He stood there with the box of his livelihood pressed to his chest and felt as though his ribs had turned to glass. For years he believed stability was love, that showing up every morning, grinding gears and steel until his hands bled, meant something. Meant everything. But Moriel was looking at him like he was the anchor she needed to cut loose in order to float. He couldn't speak. Couldn't move. Even breathing felt like it required permission he no longer had. Nolan and Tessa entered the room, small voices tethered to wide, innocent eyes. His son, 10 years old with too much curiosity for one world, stared as if trying to decipher the silence between his parents. His daughter, 7 and bright as morning, clutched a stuffed bear to her chest, sensing tension she didn't understand. Moriel kept her voice steady, controlled. Pack their things. They're staying at my sister's. No discussion. No hesitation. Just removal. He wanted to protest, to beg, to shout, to fall to his knees, but the air wouldn't come. Words clogged in his throat like stones. He was losing more than a job. He was losing laughter in the hallway, morning cartoons, crayon drawings taped proudly to the fridge, warm arms around his neck whispering goodnight, Daddy. It was all being ripped away in a single evening. Nolan stepped forward. Dad, are you coming with us? He forced a smile that felt like tearing skin. Not tonight, buddy. I'll see you soon. His son nodded slowly, not believing it but wanting to. Tessa didn't speak. She just held her bear tighter. They left with their mother, backpacks bumping softly against small shoulders, unaware that the sound of that door closing behind them would echo in their father's chest for years. When the house fell silent, he placed the factory box on the kitchen table, one relic at a time, like laying pieces of a corpse in a coffin. The thermos. The gloves. A crude drawing Nolan once made, him with a big smile and Super Dad written above. He stared at that picture until his vision blurred. Then he walked out. No coat. No plan. Just the crushing weight of disappointment pressing him into the night. The September air was cold, but he barely felt it. Numbness had already settled deeper than the bone. Streetlights stretched across empty pavement like ribs of an exposed spine, guiding him nowhere. He walked for blocks that turned into miles, thinking of everything he should have said, every moment he should have fought harder instead of enduring, every dream he buried beneath routine. His father once told him a man is measured not by his victories, but by how he stands when failure knocks him to his knees. He remembered that now, painfully, because he wasn't standing. He was drifting. Collapsing quietly like a building no one noticed was crumbling until dust filled the air. Eventually he found himself outside a diner, small, old, warm light seeping through fogged glass windows. The sign buzzed like it might flicker out any second, but its glow pulled him in like a hand reaching from the dark. He stepped inside. Grease and coffee hung thick in the air. A waitress with tired kindness in her eyes placed a cup in front of him without asking, as if she saw the break in him the way others might see spilled milk or torn clothes. He wrapped his hands around the mug, though he didn't drink. Steam curled upward but gave no comfort. It only reflected his hollow face back at him, cracked, unfamiliar. He didn't notice when someone sat down across from him. Not until a voice, low and deliberate, cut through the silence like a knife sliding into soft fruit. "You look just like my son." He lifted his head. The man before him was old, weathered skin creased with history, eyes dark with decades of quiet pain. Hair silver, neatly combed, as though he still respected time even if it no longer respected him. "My boy has been missing for 35 years, the stranger said, as though the sentence was carved from stone rather than breath. Something in the room shifted, something subtle, but alive. He felt the weight of that statement, like it had been waiting for him, like he had been meant to hear it. He tried to respond, but the stranger continued, studying him with unsettling attention, like he was both memory and possibility. "You have his eyes," the man murmured. The look of someone carrying more than his shoulders were built to hold. The words hit with eerie precision. He wanted to say, "You're wrong. I'm not your son. I'm just a failure in a diner pretending not to fall apart."